So in today's video, I'm going to be comparing two of my favourite cameras to shoot, which of course is the Pentax K3 Mark III, which is an awesome camera, and the other one is the Canon 7D Mark II, also an awesome camera. Now, the main reason I'm comparing these two cameras is due to the style of photography that I shoot, which is fast action, motorsport photography, more specifically motocross, which is off-road dirt bikes, for anyone who didn't know. And it can be quite erratic, and you know, the conditions are dusty, rainy one week, dusty the next. I mean, I've got my hat on now because it's -4 outside, and I'm supposed to be going to the track this weekend. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we might have snow at the track, who knows. So these two cameras are, for what they are, in the category that they are, APS-C DSLRs, are pretty much at the top of the pile in my opinion. There is another camera that you could chuck in the mix, and it is of course the Nikon D500, which I don't own at the moment, but never say never. I could pick that camera up if there's enough interest in this sort of stuff to compare them and then do some like on-field tests between the D500, the 7D Mark II and the K3 Mark III. Comment down below if you'd like to see that, because I think that'd be quite an interesting video to do. But for this video, yeah, like I say, I'm going to do some comparisons, physical comparisons between the two cameras, but also I want to have a look into the autofocus menus, because that's what I'm really interested in, is the autofocus capabilities, what you can do, what you can change. Because I know on the old Pentax cameras, that's where the problems lie, is that they don't have any autofocus, many in-depth autofocus capabilities really. The K3 Mark III on the other hand, that's been massively updated, so it's going to be interesting to compare and contrast between these two cameras here today. And stick around until the end of the video, because there will be a part 2 to what I'm doing now, a real life test, and I'm going to do it on a points-based system, on specific criteria that I want to test these two cameras on. And some of the stuff is what Pentax has struggled with in the past, so that will be interesting to see how far they've come, and have they reached the benchmark, which in my opinion, one of the cameras is of course the 7D Mark II. So without any further ado, I'm waffling yet again, let's jump right in and take a look at these two cameras. Okay, let's jump into the Pentax K3 Mark III menu system, and there's not enough time in this video, there's probably not enough time in several videos to go through all of the functions that this camera has packed into the menu system. It's a massive improvement over the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 K3. It's redesigned from the ground up, so there's a lot of learning to do with this camera, but it is worth it. And it's by far the best performing camera when it comes to shooting sports from Pentax, as I'm sure you will have heard me say many times before. What I'm going to focus on here is the autofocus with the viewfinder, because I'm always shooting with the optical viewfinder. I'm never in live view, so I'm going to talk about some of the options, the main options for myself. So the first main option for myself personally is, once the camera has obtained focus, I want it to keep focus priority over frames per second priority, because the way I shoot, I don't want as many images as the camera can get. I want them, in focus, and if I lose a few frames, that's completely fine with myself. So that's how I've got that set up there. And these settings change all of the time depending on the subjects. So when autofocus fails, I want the camera to start searching. So drive the lens and find the subject again. Now, these two options here for myself are the most valuable to me anyway, put it that way. So we've got the autofocus point tracking in AFC. You can see here, currently I've got it set up to type 2, middle of the road. You can obviously read the menu. The type 1 uses both the AF and AE sensor information to track the autofocus points. Type 2 uses only the autofocus sensor information to track the autofocus points. And Type 3 uses the autofocus sensor information to track with the selected autofocus points intensively. Now, on testing, I initially went for Type 3, but I've come to the conclusion that it gets a little bit too erratic. The camera is hunting all the time. And I mean, it does work, but it's a little bit too much for myself. And I've just found that the subjects are not moving that fast or that erratic that I need that type of sensitivity from the camera. So at the moment, as I say, I've got it set up to Type 2 and standard middle of the road on Type 3. And again, this changes all of the time for myself. The other options down here are not really relevant to the motocross photography. So now I'm going to jump out of here and we're going to jump into the Canon camera 7D Mark II and we'll have a look at that. Okay, let's jump into the Canon 7D Mark II and take a look at the autofocus menu specifically, because again, as you can see, there are just far too many options to go through in this menu system, and it doesn't really benefit today's video because all I'm talking about is the autofocus capabilities of these specific two cameras, the 7D Mark II and the K3 Mark III. So with the Canon, it's got the case studies. Now this camera came out in 2014, so I'm pretty sure you will have seen someone talking about these case studies by now, but if not, they're pretty much self-explanatory. They have a short explanation of what they are on here, but if you press the info button, they've got a long explanation of exactly what they do, and then some subject examples for what you want to shoot, which I think is really great. I've gone for case number 2 to continue to track the subjects while ignoring possible obstacles, because I've gone for this purely because I like singling riders out when I'm at the track, and it makes the most sense to me, because if I've got loads of riders and I'm trying to get a lot of riders in the same picture, when it comes to selling that picture, I'm not quite sure who the main subject is, and neither are the riders themselves. So I found that if I can single the riders out, this case study number 2, on paper, that seems to work the best for that. And what I will say is that I've maxed each of these options out: the tracking sensitivity, the accel decel of tracking, and the autofocus point. The autofocus point auto switching. Whether that would make any difference if I'd done it on case 3, case 4, case 5, case 6, or case 1, I'm not sure. But case 2 makes the most sense to me. Moving on from that, I've got the AI servo first image priority set to focus, purely because I don't shoot in machine gun style, and I'm not bothered about the frames per second keeping up. I'd rather have more images in focus than images slightly out of focus but the 10 frames per second kept up. Same for the second image in focus there. I want focus priority. This is quite a useful option. So we've got this mode dial, if you want to call it that here. You flick that round and you can change between the autofocus point areas. So you can select the ones that you want included in this. Now, as you can see, I've only got them 3 smaller points selected because I like to know exactly where I'm focusing basically, and I can flick between those. I don't need the full areas. Just my personal preference, really, that. But the main autofocus menu is the case studies. As you can, as I've already talked about, you can decide how you want the camera set up, and it changes again all the time depending on the subjects that you're shooting. But since 99% of the time I'm shooting at motocross tracks, this is how I've got this camera set up. And I have got a more in-depth video on this, talking about how I set this camera up for shooting sports. So if you're interested in that, the link will be in the description. So there you have it. That was a quick look at the autofocus menus for both the Pentax K3 Mark III and the Canon 7D Mark II. Now obviously that was not in depth, but I did cover the options that apply to me in the way that I use these cameras and how I've got them set up. And as I've said, it does change from time to time, but for the most part, that is how I have both these cameras set up. Now first off, if you've made it this far, congratulations for putting up with me waffling on. And secondly, as promised, here's some clips of part 2, so to speak, of testing these cameras in the field. It was a wet, windy day. Obviously we're at the end of autumn now, entering winter, and I'm so glad it wasn't this weekend, because as I've said, it's -4 outside right now and I do not want to be shooting in that stuff. But yeah, it was last weekend. I already pre-shot this video in preparation, and yeah, it was a crazy day. We got some good shots and I managed to pick a winner. So if you want to find out which camera that was, click on that video and have a watch. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.